2, 1. Good morning. This is Animal on Control. Welcome to the voice chat. These calls are pre-recorded for uploading to social media, and by joining a call, you are consenting to being recorded. Anyone wishing to join a call should email me at animaloncontrol@gmail.com, and I will reply with instructions. Today's conversation starters: pet sitter pew pew, reverse ADEPs, standardization, and abusive statistics. Joining me are Sheepie and Joe from Animal Abuse in Hungary. What is up?
Hello, everybody.
Hey,
Hey.
great to be on.
Yeah, great to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah. Joe, we haven't spoken for a while. I know there's been some changes in your situation. If you maybe want to talk about that for a few minutes. I know a lot of folks are always interested, saying, okay, what's the outcome of these, situations, like being tortured to death by, say, the neighborhood yard barkers?
Yeah, well, I'll try to keep it short. Yeah, so basically, as you probably know, I lived in Hungary for quite a while. And well, the situation in the end with the barking was just absolutely unbearable. And I actually took a job in Austria, which was, it was kind of a limited contract. It was limited for 12 months. And yeah, that was last year in summer. And so I moved to Austria then for that time. And the plan was to, after that work gig in Austria, to go back and to sell my house in Hungary, because it was just untenable. And that's basically what I did. So my work actually ended last month, as my work contract in Austria ended last month. And since then, I was going back and forth between Hungary and Austria, trying to sell that house in Hungary. And that is actually settled now. So I sold it not even 2 weeks ago. And yeah, so I'm living in Austria now I moved in with my girlfriend. And yeah, so I really hope that I can kind of finish this Hungarian chapter as quickly as possible. But my mom is still living there, so I will have to visit her now and then. And the place where she lives there, the dog problem is just the exact same as where I lived. So
wow,
it's I will not get away completely from the madness, but I'm actually noticing that here in Austria as well. It's there have been quite some problems here, some unexpected problems. But I can perhaps talk about that later if you like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, like we were just talking about, like you got barked out of the country, not just out of your house.
Exactly.
I know it sounds like it's a really, snarky or unkind thing to say, but that's what happens. People are, forced to relocate due to these problems. And you just hope you're not jumping out of the frying pan into the fire, proverbially speaking. Let me ask you a question. You sold your house in Hungary. Do you feel you got, or do you feel that the dog problem negatively impacted the sale price in any way?
Well, that's a good question, actually. I was really worried about that beforehand as well. But it's really interesting that the topic didn't even come up. And I think in Hungary, it's just this has become so normal that with the realtor, you're not even talking about that anymore, because there's no place you can go anyway. So if you want to be in Hungary, so it's you just have to accept it, or you literally have to move out of the country. Yeah. And so we didn't even talk about that. And the price that I got for the house was just absolutely normal. I mean, the real estate market at the moment is fantastic if you want to sell. So the prices they just skyrocketed a few years ago, and it's still like that. So I mean, I made a huge profit with that, so I think I can stick that up the dog nutters' arses.
Yep.
Actually, can I say that word here? I'm not sure.
Oh yeah, well look, like I said, I drop F-bombs quite frequently. So it's like PG-13 at a minimum. Well, that's
Right.
good. I mean, so that's I mean the thing is it's good, but you know, you realize as you mentioned, you've been seeing some problems of this nature in Austria also. And really the problem is everywhere. And maybe it doesn't always manifest itself the same way because it could be endlessly barking dogs. It could be dogs in restaurants or other places they don't belong. It could be, you know, a dangerous dog problem. You know, there's all these different aspects of the problem. Like you could be going on vacation. It's like, yeah, I always wanted to see Australia, but then the plane has to ditch in Algeria because some fake service dog got diarrhea in the airplane. And that stuff like that actually happens, you know. So, and that's what happens with a lot of people as they get out of the space, particularly if once their problem is resolved, like the nutter neighbor moves away or they move away, perhaps. But even in my cases, I mean, twice with my across the street neighbors, with that house across the street, twice I've had to do the, you know, showdown over the barky dogs. The most recent time, with the current ones, it wasn't a big deal because I think they were sick of the dog anyway. So they just, when I started complaining about it, it was just boom, gone. And they have not, I'm knocking on wood, they have not gotten a dog since. So, but you never know it's going to manifest. Like I said, we got a dangerous dog problem here, you know, at large pit bulls and so forth. So, you know, the house next door could change hands and a bunch of nutters could move in. So, at least me, the way I feel is I'm always like slightly on edge because you never know when it's going to erupt again. And you know how difficult or what a difficult problem it is to solve.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
So, well, I guess that's good news so far. So, Sheepy, how about your situation? What's going on? Because you have that dog hoarder living nearby. What's any updates on that situation?
I mean, it's basically the same. Nothing has really changed. She moved. She has all of these like small kennels, I guess you would say, like chain link, maybe 5 by 6 or 5 by 10 foot kennels that she moves around. Like she used to have a bunch of ducks in this like kennel outside of the large fence with the dogs. I don't know what happened to the ducks because they were just gone one day. And so she's disassembled that kennel and then recently moved it inside of the Jurassic Park fence. So there's now a small section inside the Jurassic Park fence that's comprised of this chain link kennel. I don't know what, if anything, is in it now. Like I told you briefly, we were hearing the sounds of a goat kid, and those sounds have disappeared. I haven't heard the goat or seen the goat for a few weeks now, so I don't know if the dogs ripped it to shreds or if it's still back there being and just quiet. I can't really see a goat now, so I don't know. I don't know what's going on with her. And then yesterday I drove by and she had put in a giant like deer feeder in her front yard, like one of those things that like sprays corn everywhere, you know?
Yep.
So I don't know if she's trying to attract some deer to the yard so the dogs can maul the deer. I don't know. I don't know what is going on with her. The property is this actually concerns me because we're talking more and more. You know, we haven't lived here for even 2 years yet. And they moved in about 6 months after us with all these dogs.
Yep.
And so we've been talking more and more about moving in the next 5 or so years just to get away from this area. Because as you know, we kind of moved out to what turned out to be like an unincorporated part of this metro complex, I guess you could say. So there's no dog control, there's no leash laws. It's perfectly legal for all these people to let dogs run around loose, and there's no restriction on the numbers. And I talked about on a previous call, I've contacted like the sheriff's department. The deputy told me he regrets that he can do nothing about it. And they've tried to get the county commissioner to implement some kind of leash laws, because I guess they go on a lot of dog-related calls, unsurprisingly. But basically, there's nothing that's going to happen to help the situation apart from either them moving or us moving. So anyways, I have been concerned that the way she's basically making the property a disgusting, like, dog waste filled nightmare is going to impact the price that we're able to sell this property for
Yeah,
eventually.
it may. Did you post? There was a link. There was a post on Dog Free about someone who'd sold their home. I assume it was a suburban house because somebody moved in next door and started hoarding pit bulls. So you had nonstop barking. You had the overpowering stench of dog waste, and they sold the house. And even a lot of folks that were looking at the house were like, "Well, is it always like this? Like, does the barking ever stop or any?" And he said he took a $55,000 loss on it,
Yeah.
which is a pretty. And then the problem was he was talking about suing, but the thing is he's already out of there. That's the problem. I mean, it might be actionable, but really you want to prosecute the lawsuit beforehand, right? Because that's a private nuisance. So and those cases can easily be won. I mean, provided you collect enough evidence and present the case, you know, accordingly, you can, win on that. Because that's the thing is, I was like, dude, you already basically you already cut your losses. But yeah, it's a concern, that because I think it does in a lot of cases, sort of ruin the neighborhood ambiance. And it's why it's interesting you're talking about goats and ducks and things. I mean, in most incorporated areas or even unincorporated areas, because I live in an unincorporated area, and you can't have farm animals. I think the only exception is you can have chickens, you can have hens, but not roosters. Interestingly, the roosters are zoned out because they're, quote, too noisy. And I believe it's the same with ducks and geese also. But you can have a yard full of dogs that bark nonstop. That's okay, right? Because Fido and Rover always get the exception. I had a neighbor with ducks too, and I don't know what happened to them. I don't know, maybe code enforcement told her to get rid of them. My thought with your neighbor is perhaps I'm sure those other animals were driving the pit bulls crazy with bloodlust. So even if the pits didn't kill them, again, it's like waving a red flag in front of a bull. It's probably, if you're going to have pit bulls, you're probably better off not having anything else. No other dogs, no other animals of other species. It's a pit bull singularity in action.
Right. Well, I'm just imagine, like I've told you multiple times, how she has dogs inside the garage as well, and hoses it out. She literally treats her
Ugh.
house like it's a dog pound.
Yep.
Like she's got all these dogs inside the garage on concrete, uh, in kennels, like in those chain link kennels, and then just hoses the waste out onto her driveway, which of course the driveway connects to the road that goes to my house. So imagine, I'm trying to show the house and she's out there hosing piles of dog shit down the driveway as someone's driving up to come view
Right.
my
Or
property.
somebody drives up and the road is full of at-large pit bulls because you've shared those
Yes.
videos also. I'd be like, no, thanks.
I know. If it was me, if she was here first before we moved in, I would have kept looking for a different property.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
the problem with this stuff. Like, and even if we do move in the next like 5 years or so, there's no guarantee that I won't run into a similar situation
Oh, yeah.
anywhere else I go.
Yep. Yeah, it's a problem
And
everywhere. It used to be people would, like when I first got into the space last decade, people would say that, they live in a downtown apartment tower because, if you live in the suburbs, at least at the time, like these suburban subdivisions were the worst because their dogs are allowed, but you're in close proximity to them. So particularly if you have barking or other dog related problems, you get the worst of it. But these apartment buildings would restrict them. There'd either be no pets or no dogs, but now they're allowed everywhere. So even if you get like some $5,000 a month apartment in New York City, you can be barked out of that. And there's dog waste in the hallway and the elevator.
Right. We've always been kind of I don't want to live in an HOA because, it's my property type of thing. But I was reading comments on that post about the guy losing or taking $55,000 loss on his home property value. And some of the comments were saying like I prefer an HOA now with really strict rules just to try to mitigate some of this issue and I think animal uncontrol or animal abuse in Hungary, you might have a similar experience in Hungary. But what I'm facing out here in what quote the country is that anyone that brings any type of complaint about behaviors out here, whether dog related or not, there's just a chorus of people saying, "Well, this is the country. If you don't like it, move back to the city. You city slickers need to stay in the city because this is just how we live in the country." And it'll be the most feral behavior. You know what I mean? Like recently, this is not dog related, but there was some guy walking around exposing himself to people. And I swear there was a post about it on the local Facebook group, and people were literally like, "Well, this is the country," and it's like, really?
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is like, but it doesn't matter where you live. You have property rights, okay, and you have a right to use that space that you pay for in peace. And but it's the problem is like, they don't. The dog people in particular don't respect that. So you might be able to sue your neighbor for private nuisance because that's what it is. I mean, even though there's no, because even when you have animal control, it's like animal control is either useless or perhaps even worse than useless in a lot of places because those positions get taken up by dog nutters. They don't see themselves as serving the citizens, right? They're basically doggy social workers. So whatever's in the best interest of the dog or perhaps the dog owner, that's their only priority, unfortunately. Which kind of makes me wonder a lot of these animal control agencies, they don't, now with the no-kill policies, they don't pick up loose dogs or take owner surrender. So now we have an exploding, a stray dog or feral dog population. And Joe, actually, you put up a really good video about that, I guess a year or so ago, like the origins of these feral dog packs. That was really good. Actually, I've recommended it a couple of times. And why, the measures that most of these idiots propose really don't solve the problem. It's like the three primary sources of them. But the thing is like, even if you have animal control, they're pretty useless. So, unfortunately. Yeah. Yeah, that's a shame, but you'd think that, there's economic interests in this space, not on their side, but on our side also. You think that the real estate people, the construction people, various, economic interests would take an interest in mitigating these problems because you have these dog nutters that just crater these neighborhoods. And you wonder why, I guess the almighty dog has been placed above the almighty dollar.
Yeah, well, the thing in Hungary is, I mean, I was really surprised about that too. But I mean, the only explanation that I actually have is that they are actually looking at the money, but by now the number of dog nutters has increased so much that they're actually the majority. So if you want to sell a house, then it's probably even considered an advantage if you have neighbors that have dogs as well.
Yeah.
You know, look at all the friends you can make in your neighborhood. You know, you have a conversation starter, which is your mutt, of course. And yeah, I mean, there's no other way I can explain, or there's no other way I can explain it, because it's a total mystery to me why the topic didn't even come up. You know, that, I mean, the realtor was there several times, and I mean, she noticed the madness, but
Yeah.
she just considers this normal. You know, she thinks that, yeah, you know, this is Hungary. And Sheepy, as you said, you know, this the exact same thing that people say there is, yeah, but you know, this is how we live. You know, this is the countryside, and we like animals here. We like animals. And when they say animals, they mean dogs, of course. Yeah,
Of course. Yeah, of course.
like
Yeah. Well, I
that's the
like
dog.
animals, but I don't like listening to someone's mutated crap hound carry on 24 hours a day.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, maybe you could say maybe when you're at your mother's house, you could maybe approach it passive, in a passive aggressive way. You could say, hey, I don't always listen to Van Halen at 2 a.m, but when I do, so do the neighbors.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah,
good one. Yeah.
my hope almost is like in retrospect, I think that the my nutter neighbor was attracted to this area because it the properties out here are larger than inside of a town or even a suburban town. Like I have 8 acres. I know her property is like 5-ish, I want to say. It's a little bit smaller than mine, but it's still, much larger than the average like suburban or urban lot if you even have a yard. And so it might work out in my favor in that the type of people that want to move out to these types of properties um, are dog nutters
Mm.
generally. Like the house I sold to move here was on 5 acres, and I had completely fenced it in with really nice like field fence and a barbed wire, like a top wire for my sheep. And the guy that bought it from me just has a humongous dog. It's like a giant schnauzer, which I didn't even know those existed before I saw his. And that thing is massive. And he was so excited about the nice fencing we had put in,
Oh.
so his dog could run around on the acreage. Like the guy doesn't have any other animals that need, acres of grass to eat. It's literally now just his dog's playground.
He's got a
And
private dog park. Yeah.
yes, and I drive
Still,
by that place sometimes because it's not that far from where I live currently, and sometimes I just like to drive by and see what the property looks like now because we had done a lot of work to it. We put in some nice landscaping, we put in an entirely new fence on the entire 5 acres. Like, I had done a lot of improvements and was pretty proud of the property. And it's an overgrown mess. The nice landscaping is just like total filled with weeds and overgrown, and there's just like probably piles of dog crap all over the whole thing now. So it's kind of sad for me to drive by it, but
yeah, it's a
I don't know.
shame. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
they just blight neighborhoods. They destroy their own properties, and like I said, yeah, they crater these communities. It's a social blight, is what it is. A social and an economic blight. It's a cancer. It's a boil on the ass of civilization. Hey, I wanted to move on to some of the conversation starters. I know I haven't been on for a while. Like I was telling Joe earlier, I've been really busy with work. I had a 2-year project. Well, just wrap up a couple of weeks ago. But now I have all these sort of post implementation issues to deal with. But we have a long weekend. Oh, that's what I forgot to say. I always always miss out. Happy Labor Day, dogs. 3-day weekend for the U.S. based folks anyway. So I wanted to. Can you see my screen? I've got where it says New Jersey dog sitter shoots, kills couples beloved, yada yada yada.
Yep.
Can you see that? Yeah, this came up, and this is kind of an interesting case where um, this this couple, or at least the woman anyway, was on, I guess it's called Rover. It's a pet sitting agency. So they connect people who need a pet sitter with someone offering pet sitting services. So this couple you know, hired this other couple to pet sit their pit bull when they were on vacation. So what happened was first they got a call that the pit bull had, started a fight with another dog, right? So that was the first call. And you're thinking, okay, yeah, purpose-bred fighting dog got into a fight with another dog. Who could have seen that coming? Like, wow, I'll be dipped in shit. Nobody could have predicted that, right? So first it gets into a fight with another dog. And then the second call, so as the husband called to say he had shot and killed the dog. So we got some little pet sitter pew here. Now I guess on the upside, neither he nor his wife became the next Jacqueline Durand. I mean, pet sitting pit bulls is not the smartest thing in the whole world, I don't think. But so I hear it over and over as the dog numbers. I put a buckshot in your dog's head. He went after, so apparently the dog attacked the wife. He went after my pregnant wife. Come and get your expletive dead dog's body off my property. So now, because this guy is going, this is in TV news and everything. So the cook, the shooter, was charged with animal cruelty. And that can carry some long-term sentences. This was another case where actually it was a man who actually killed his wife's dog. And this guy, this was a while ago. When was this? Well, back in June. This guy is facing 10 years in prison for killing a dog. 10 years. So, and that's probably what's going to happen to this guy. I think there was also a weapons charge also. The gun may not have been properly permitted, because New Jersey has a lot of kind of onerous gun laws, at least compared to most other states. So yeah, they got the dog from a pit rescue. Blah, blah, blah. And there's all this, crying and like carrying on. Nobody says like, well, was a pregnant woman okay? Like, is this another Jacqueline Durand scenario? It's like, no, all they care about is the dog. And this man's being prosecuted for, shooting it. I guess because apparently it wasn't a straightforward self-defense scenario, because I think the dog attacked the woman, but then the husband shot the dog as it was running away. But my attitude is, who cares? Who cares? Remember Sheepie, there was that, you might have posted a link to this also. There was a discussion. I was either on Ban Pit Bulls or Dog Free about, holding the owners of dogs that maul and kill, holding them criminally liable. Like, no more. It's like, oh, your dog deleted the kid next door. It's like, okay, here's your $100 off leash ticket, and they call it a day. It's like, no, that needs to carry criminal penalties. Provided these dogs are allowed to be owned at all, the owners need to be held criminally liable. And so one of these defund the police types injected themselves into like, don't we have enough people in prison already? It's like, okay, dummy, what do you think of cases like this or this, right? Is it really in the public interest to incarcerate people, like give them hard time for killing dogs? Is it? Yeah, aren't there enough people? But they don't object to this. They're not coming out. They're not protesting and saying, okay, yeah, we shouldn't be, prosecuting and incarcerating. They're all for it when the victim is a dog. But when the dog victimizes somebody else, they're like, oh, it's all good. You can't put somebody in jail. You can't put the dog owner in jail for what the dog did, But if somebody fights back or even just deletes a random dog, yeah, put him in prison and throw away the key. So I think it even said here was that, they're saying that it doesn't go far enough. So yeah, instead of like putting, if you kill a dog, instead of 10 years in prison, let's give him 20. Let's get justice for Rover.
Right, that's what stood out. One of the things that really stood out to me about this story is that they've started a GoFundMe And they're now on a mission to increase like the charges that could be brought against people in these
Yep.
types of situations. Like you said, animal cruelty, which I don't even see how this would be defined as animal cruelty, because it doesn't sound like he was abusing or torturing the dog. Like, it
Right. He
attacked
didn't
his wife and he
soak it
shot it.
like, well, that's the thing is like, they twist the definition of terms, right? Like, yeah, this is like shooting an animal in the head, or even a person for that matter, is not an act of cruelty. Like, yeah, if he'd soaked a dog in gasoline and set it on fire, that would be an act of animal cruelty. And that kind of stuff I'm not cool with. Yeah, I don't do torture, I don't do cruelty. But yeah, if something needs to die, kill it. Like, because, oh, that was something else I wanted to digress into. You, particularly you, Sheepy, you'll get a kick out of this, but you know, dogs do not have a right to life that we are bound to respect, right? We don't need like much of a reason to kill any animal. You know, none of them do. But the problem is that the system has been corrupted, you know, by mutt nutters to grant all kinds of protection to these things. And then they wonder why we have so many dog bites and so many dog at large problems, because this even comes up in my neighborhood, because these animals are protected. They get a ridiculous amount of protection in the system. You want to hear something else? I think you and I discussed this privately, that something came up in my next door a few months ago where a cat was shot. This woman was allowing her cat to wander the neighborhood, which I admit, even though I like cats, well, actually, because I like cats, is probably not a great idea for a couple of reasons. So the cat gets shot. It didn't die. You know what the authorities did? Big fat goose egg. They did nothing. You know, they called the sheriff, and the sheriff said, well, you know what? Maybe you should keep your cat indoors. Now imagine saying that was the attitude for people shooting these dogs. Oh, somebody shot your dog. Well, maybe if you kept it under control, it wouldn't have happened. I know there's been a lot of I hate dogs and K9 have been reporting about a case in Iowa where a cop, you know, shot a dog that was charging him. And if you look at the video, the dog was definitely behaving aggressively. And now they're like, you know, this whole big thing. The dog owner threw a tantrum in a public meeting. He knocked over the podium and had to be forcibly ejected. And people are chanting, you know, justice for Rover, whatever. You know, you see like there's so much value placed on the lives of these things, so much more than anything else, even including humans. And it's just ridiculous the amount of, you know, protection these creatures get, and it's so out of proportion to whatever limited value they add to society, if any.
Yeah, one of the things that really makes me sick is the way these types of things are treated in the media and by the police. So you've seen when a dog gets shot or a dead dog is discovered somewhere or whatever, there will be like literal press conferences with the police department. And I don't remember the exact case, but I remember one where the cop or whatever was like, this type of person is the worst piece of scum. We're gonna pursue this to the fullest extent of the law. Over some like dog, I think it
Yeah.
was like the guy who was caught on camera like kicking a puppy or something.
Yeah.
They treat it like he's committing like a mass murder. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They talk about, but when someone's dog okay, like for example, a case they've been covering recently too. Um, that boy, I think he was 6 years old, and was handcuffed, hands and feet, by his mom, her, I think, boyfriend and uncle. They were punishing him for not cleaning up after the uncle's pit bull. And he was then attacked by the pit bull while handcuffed and I guess being tied to a chair.
Oh, jeez.
Where are the press conferences where the police are saying these are the worst scum on earth? We're going to prosecute
Well,
them to
they
the
are,
fullest
you
extent.
know.
Yeah.
Right, they clearly are. That's one of the most horrible cases I've ever seen of child abuse. But I don't see the same reaction from the police or the media establishment. Like, they're not calling that mother on TV the worst scum, the worst type of scum on the planet, when she clearly is.
Right.
But some dude that kicks a dog is being hunted down like a serial killer or something.
Yeah, it's like
It's just so bizarre.
yeah, it's like they go after these people harder than, like, say, Jack the Ripper or the Zodiac Killer. You know? Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, the value, attributed to the lives of these things is just ridiculous. Actually, there's something else I wanted to, I didn't have this on my list of to-dos, but there was a Supreme Court case in 1897. Both of you will appreciate this. So I think it was Supreme Court case. I think it was in 1897. That what involved, actually, it involved the killing of a dog. It's actually maybe the first or only time something like that went to the Supreme Court, where it's like dogs have no right to life. Now, I should have saved the, Sentel versus New Orleans. Yeah, this is really interesting stuff, but that, yeah, this is saying that a state statute providing that no dog shall be entitled to the protection of the law unless placed upon the assessment rolls. So I don't know if we want to go through this whole thing, but I think the point they're making is that you can claim a dog is your property if it's properly registered, right, with the municipality or whoever issues, dog licenses. And that in a civil action for killing a dog, the owner cannot recover beyond the value fixed by himself in the last assessment preceding the killing. So you have to declare that the dog is worth $100. So if somebody kills your dog, you'd have a civil claim for the $100. It's within the police power of the state. So this was interesting. So this related to someone was trying to recover the value of a Newfoundland bitch known as Countess Lona. Okay, alleged to have been negligently killed by the railroad company. I'd been passing around that video, that dog, quote, training video. They always say, oh, the dog needs more training. And I got the perfect training video right here. So this is an example of a dog getting trained, literally. So the company answered, denying the allegation of negligence, and set up a separate defense that plaintiff had neither complied either requirements of state law or of city ordinances. So the dog basically got hit by a train, but the owner was trying to recover damages anyway, in spite of the dog not being properly registered. I believe that's what's being expressed here, right? So then this relates to civil actions. So basically they're saying that, the offense is basically limited to the monetary value of the dog. Now they go down in here, and where did they say this? I want to look up something here. I want to find no right to. Okay, so as this goes on, there's a lot to this here, okay, that laws for the protection of domestic animals are regarded as having but a limited application to dogs and cats, regardless of statute, okay? Regardless of statute, a ferocious dog is looked upon as hostis humani generis, and as having no right to life, which man is bound to respect. Okay, a vicious dog has no right to his life, which man is bound to respect. Okay, that's what they had to say about that, right? So, but interestingly, though, this case, probably a lot of these cases where a dog is killed, they're qualifying it as like a cruelty case. Like you didn't want to just you didn't delete the dog in self-defense or for some practical reason. You did it because you wanted the dog to suffer, which is, it's a pretty big, I mean, you're or they are attributing motive here that doesn't really seem to be apparent. Like, okay, I just want the dog to endure like all kinds of pain and suffering. That's why I shot it. Like whether it was that case with a cop or the case with his pet sitter or the man that killed his wife's dog. It's like, yeah, I just want to like inflict as much pain and suffering as possible. I don't know how you distill that out of this. I mean, maybe they wanted to eat the dog, but you don't know that, right? All you can look at are just the facts of the case. They didn't say, yeah, I'm going to make that dog suffer. I'm going to hurt him, right? I'm going to make him just suffer like on, there's really no evidence of that. I mean, not that I can see. But I thought this was interesting. I've raised this case a couple of times. The dogs have no right to his life, which man is bound to respect. Now, of course, today that's changed. Now they have more right to life than people do. But I don't know if there have been any, court cases, and this is just, in the United States or anywhere else. It's stated distinctly that, yes, dogs have a right to life. Like we're bound to protect and preserve their lives, even at expense to ourselves. Or is that just sort of the general consensus?
It would be a nightmare if there was a Supreme Court case at some point that established a precedent that dogs are something more. So I think the problem is legally dogs are property still. Like a
Yep.
dog is just property. So like this is saying the only value of the dog is what it's like actually worth as property.
Yep.
But the society has a completely different view of dogs than the legal definition. And they're pushing and succeed a lot of the times in treating a dog like it's a human or more valuable than a human. Like
Yep.
in the case with the dog sitters, I have a problem with the way it's being reported. Like they're not doing any type of real journalism or investigation of this. They're taking the word of the people that owned the aggressive dog, and that's it. Like,
Yep.
have they looked into, I mean, these people were dog sitters for probably a while now. They probably never, it seems like they've never had any other instances. They've never abused or been cruel to other dogs they've had at their house or killed any other ones. But like, is there no you know what I mean? Like, is there no situation in which they're allowed to defend themselves? Like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
you know
Well,
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying? Like,
you're right. Yeah. I mean, typically, I mean, almost always, these cases are distorted in the media for propaganda purposes, right? They don't look at both sides. Nobody gets asked any hard questions. It's just taken it, like, my poor sweet little fur baby got, murdered by the reincarnation of Jack the Ripper. And the media is like, oh, okay. You're right. It's totally, but that's the thing. And what's interesting is that, at least technically, and people say this to me, they say, well, yeah, dogs are just property under the law. And I said, yeah, but they're property that's protected by animal cruelty laws. And the threshold, it seems the threshold for proving animal cruelty, at least in case of a dog, like if you shoot a cat, and actually that cat that got shot probably did suffer. It survived. So it had to deal with a, bullet wound until it healed. They never found out who did that. Well, they didn't find out who did it because nobody was interested in doing so. It's like, oh, well, but yeah, but they're property that's protected by animal cruelty laws. And it seems that the system is definitely rigged in their favor. In other words, the legal system is weaponized against people that do this, even if it's a straight up self-defense case. And I know, I've spoken to that many times, when Colleen Lynn was on one of these calls last year. I got a call, like there was a dog actually attacking me, and I stabbed it or shot it, and I got arrested. I'm being charged with animal cruelty. And that's just insane. That's just straight up nuts. But I think that's what's happening is, and it goes to the whole unjust nature of this, is that, yeah, the legal system is being weaponized against anyone who, doesn't submit to the almighty dog, right? Like if Fido wants a chunk of you, he has an absolute unconditional right to it. And there's nothing you can do about it. But you wonder if that's even legal, right? But yet it happens. That's what happens. Joe, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, well,
I know you live outside I often bring up legal stuff in the U.S. and I know it, but a lot of things too is, even though you're not under U.S. jurisdiction, but a lot of these, principles do apply in a lot of other places, unfortunately. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, there's many aspects here that are actually interesting. Now, the funny thing is that you were talking about, the term of animal abuse, or like, dog abuse or whatever, and animal cruelty it was. And I was actually a bit confused by that for quite a long time, because I thought it was just a problem with my English, because I thought, I read all those reports as well where, people just killed dogs, like even by accident, and then they got charged with animal cruelty. And then I thought, okay, has the term somehow changed its meaning, like in the last 10 years?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I mean, genuinely, I really thought that, okay, it's probably, the problem comes from my side, because it's probably some kind of linguistic subtlety or something that I just don't know anything about. But I mean, I'm glad that you that you clarified that now, because so apparently it's not just me who thinks that this is weird. Because the thing is that even in Hungary, I looked a little bit into the legal situation, and the funny thing there as well is, if you even kill a dog, by accident, I mean, let's say you run it over with your car because it was just, running in front of your car, and you couldn't do anything. You hit it and then it died. You would actually be charged with animal cruelty. And
Wow.
I mean, what is the cruelty? I mean, first of all, it was not intentional. I mean, it's absolutely, it's just a complete lack of common sense, and you just see that this has, and as you said, this only happens with dogs. Nobody would give a shit about cats or the guinea pig or whatever. It
Wildlife,
just with
farm
dogs.
animals. Yeah. Like, if you hit a raccoon with your car, or even protected wildlife, it's like, well, I mean, if it's an accident, I mean, that's the thing, at least, well, it's interesting because, and I've run into, like, dog nutters are agitating for that. So even if you say hit a dog with your car by accident, and it happens because the dog is running at large, it jumps right in front of you. You can't stop or swerve in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And you hit it. And it's like, I mean, that could happen to people. It's like if somebody, like, somebody jumps out from between two cars in front of your vehicle and you kill a person. But if that's what happens, I mean, the police will thoroughly investigate. They'll make sure, okay, but as provided you're operating the vehicle legally, like you're obeying the speed limit, posted signs, you're not intoxicated, it was an accident. You couldn't have avoided it. And I agree, because, like, look, if somebody chooses to self-eliminate by jumping in front of my car, there's nothing I can do about that, right? It's like, there's nothing I can do. And that happens. But yeah, they're agitating, saying even if you hit a dog, and that kind of, the dog just jumps in front of your car and there's nothing you can do. Yeah, they want to start incarcerating those people also. Now, like with these killings, like with the pet sitter or the guy that killed his wife's dog, or the cop, you know, that was intentional, right? And you could argue that, you know, the standards for that should be somewhat different, although I don't, well, at least with the cop shooting the dog, that was a good shoot. The pet sitter shooting the dog was like, I guess it's kind of ethically neutral in my opinion, because it wasn't exactly a cut and dried self-defense case. But in that case, it's like, look, it's a dog. It's not a person with rights. And moreover, our system, which is very expensive, right? Because, you know, part of what goes behind the defund the police movement or decriminalizing various things is like, yeah, you don't want to, you know, invest all the resources in arresting, prosecuting, and incarcerating somebody unless the person is like a real threat to public safety, right? But somebody like that, like, yeah, somebody who shoots or stabs a dog that's attacking them, or somebody who runs over a dog completely by accident, that's not somebody who's dangerous to have around. There's no good reason, but they do. And they weaponize the legal system. But that's actually kind of scary to think that, okay, you could just kill a dog completely by accident with your car. It's actually kind of what happened here was, where did they describe it? What happened was, yeah, so it seems that while following in a walk upon the streets, she, meaning the dog, stopped on the track of the railroad company. So the dog basically decided to stand there in front of, and otherwise being engaged for the moment, failed to notice the approach of an electric car, which was coming towards her at great speed. And being, moreover, heavy and young and not possessive her usual agility, she was caught by the car and instantly killed. Now, this is not an animal cruelty case, but yeah, so the dog basically walked in front of a train and got deleted. It's a training scenario. Get it? Hardy, har, har. And, you know, but that's the kind of thing you can't hold. Particularly a train car. I mean, trains can't stop on a dime.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, even if they, you know, it could take several minutes to slow down to a stop. So even if the dog is a quarter mile, and you know, it's probably also a Darwinian principle in effect here. You know? Well, that's interesting about the laws in Hungary involving you know, the accidental killings.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, as you said, you know, it seems to be the same, or it seems to kind of spread this kind of mentality that no matter where you are, you know, if you are somehow the culprit in the death of a fur baby, then it's automatically animal cruelty, and
Yep.
you have to be crucified. You know, it's like, even if there was nothing that you could do, you know, no matter if you're in the United States or in Europe, like this seems to become the standard now, and I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Well, you know, I often talk about, we could actually may segue into that. You know, I talk about, you know, in dog culture, you often have these sort of internal conflicts. Like, for example, the fluffy dog people versus the pit nutters, or the quote legit service dog people versus the fake service dog people. And I guess there's a few other, you know, archetypes out there, but it's the kind of thing. And I actually wrote a blog essay last decade called "Hoist with Your Own Petard," because the thing is, you could see that these, you know, these dog foamers want these laws passed. Even if you kill a dog completely by accident, there's zero intent. Yes, we're going to prosecute, you know, and incarcerate that person. But what if it's them? What if they hit a dog by accident? Are they willing to go to prison for that? Exactly. Because that could happen. And not only can, it probably will at some point. You know, somebody that's agitated for these laws is going to be basically crucified under them. And it's another aspect to this, that because that's what you have. I mean, I say this often, but it's worth repeating, is you have, you know, basically, yeah, dogs are treated like sacred animals, and dog owners are, you know, not held to any real standards at all. They can just do whatever they want with impunity. But then what happens when those interests intersect, right? So they say, okay, if somebody runs, I let my dog run the neighborhood. If it gets hit by a car, it was completely by accident. I want justice for Rover. I want that driver punished. They need to be punished. Well, what if you're the driver, right?
Yeah.
What if you're the driver against anarcho-tyranny? They say, I can just do whatever I want. That's the thing is, yeah, they want to be able to, break all the rules insofar as there are any, but they want to be protected by at least some rules. It's an anarcho-tyranny arrangement. It's a huge double standard, but they're probably good. That seems like a great idea until you're the one, they're the ones who get arrested.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you see a lot of that in this space, and they don't get it, right? They're too stupid to understand that. So they're totally selfish and self-focused. They never see themselves as part of the problem. Yeah, that's nuts. But I thought this is interesting. Folks might want to read up on this. But that's what happened was, the dog got hit by a train, and the guy was claiming that the railroad company needed to, pay out for the dog. And of course, they're saying it's like, look, your dog, chose to self-eliminate by jumping in front of one of our trains. What do you want us to do about it? Yeah. And that's what the court ruled, was that, dogs do not have a right to life that we're bound to respect, which, I agree with. But the whole sentiment and public policy is shifted completely away from that. And needs to shift back, in my opinion. Yep. So there was maybe, I don't know, did either of you have any thoughts on that? I wanted to move on to at least one more topic.
Sure, go on.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to, talk about the different, like I said, sort of archetypes in this space of different types of, dog foamers. And, often you hear me complain about or focus my dislike on what we call ADEPs. It's an acronym for all dogs except pits. So basically, it's somebody who's firmly committed to all of the sort of poisonous ideals of the dog cult, but hates pit bulls, right? They talk about double standards. It's like, if a pit bull, say, who's at fault if a dog attacks somebody, right? And they say, well, if it's a pit bull, it's the dog's fault. But if it's any other dog, even one that's very similar, it's the victim's fault, right? And talk about being hoist with your own petard. But what I found is that we were, I think, discussing this in the Discord the other week. There's another type, and I don't know what I would call them. Maybe it's like a reverse ADEP. And that is somebody who you would say is really in our space. Like, they don't like the animals themselves. They find dog culture distasteful. They, dislike dog owners and dog ownership and dog culture generally. But there's one aspect of it that they're all in on, and typically it involves some kind of working dog. Like, yeah, they'll just say what I just said. Yeah, I don't like dogs. I don't like dogs in the community. Dogs and dog owners have way too much protection and privilege in the system, and yada, yada, yada. But then the but comes, but well-trained service dogs are essential. And as those people, I'll say it's like, well, I mean, I think service dogs are a scam, but then they flip out, right? They throw a tantrum. It's like, you want to screw over every blind person on earth. And it's like, look, only 2% of blind people even use a guide dog. So it's like all of them, and talk about like, the straw manning, the argument, like, yeah, you're an ableist, you hate disabled people, you want them all to die. It's like, no, well, first of all, the fact that it's not standardized, at least not in the US, leaves the door open for a ton of fraud and abuse. Because, I mean, everybody knows at this point that probably bare minimum 95% of dogs presented as service dogs are fake. They have not been trained to do anything. They're probably not even housebroken in a lot of cases. But the thing is, there's very little we can do about it because there's no real standards. There's no oversight. There's no permitting system. They don't have to prove anything to anybody. Right. And I really got into it with one of those people. I want to talk about the nature of standards because one of them, and again, it was somebody like that. He's like, they're dog free. They don't like dogs. They don't like dog owners, but they're all in on service dogs. They're like, yeah, service dogs are the exception, the most amazing thing on earth. And I'm thinking like a service dog is still a dog, right? It's not like actually it was Shep that brought this up at one point. There's really no such thing as a service dog, period. It's not like there's no breed of service dog, although some service dogs or some breeds are, I guess, better suited to the activity than others, but there's no breed of service dog. It's really, it's just it's a stink beast that's been trained to do something and may do so some fraction of a percent of the time. They're all in on it. And I said, look, the problem with service dogs is they're not standardized. And I made a post about this on my community page. And I said, okay, genius, you tell me what the standards are, like real standards, right? Because a real standard involves something that's measurable, verifiable, provable, right? That's a standard. Like, for example, I was looking at this. I said, what are you were talking about, say, academic standards. What are the admission standards for Princeton? And, for folks who don't know, that's a private university. It's one of the most prestigious universities in the United States. It's a tier 1 school. It's in New Jersey, actually. And they have admission, but, high-end schools like that have admission standards, right? Specific standards. They say if you don't pass their SAT and GPA requirements, they will likely reject you without much consideration. Okay, to have the best shot of getting in, you have to have at least a 1560 SAT or a 35 ACT or a 395 GPA or higher, right? Now you can exceed the standards. Like if you got a 1600 SAT and a 4.0 GPA, great. But these are actual standards. They don't take your word for it. Like if you apply to Princeton, you'd say, hey, yeah, I got a 1600 on my SAT. They're not going to take your word for it. They're going to say, they're going to, requisition those test results. Saying, oh, trust me, bro, is not a standard. Okay, and you could look at this. This is like throughout every industry, right? It relates, it's something measurable, it's something verifiable, right? Again, a minimum standard. So I told this guy, I said, look, explain to me, do something like this. Where are the standards in the ADA law? Something like this, like, okay, a service dog must do this, and we're going to check. There's nothing like that, okay? Because I said, look, general descriptions and arbitrary claims are not standards. Like, for example, if Princeton just says, okay, we want new students to get good grades. Do you get good grades? Quote, good grades is not a standard. This is a standard. Okay, because again, it's something measurable. It's something provable because they're going to pull those high school transcripts. They want proof. They're not going to take your word for it. The service dog paradigm, at least in the US, has nothing like that. It's all based on hearsay. But they just kept all they would do is post the link to the ADA laws. I said, yeah, I know what the laws say. I've actually read them out loud on these videos. They do not have anything like this. Okay. They don't say, well, the dog has to, again, you have some kind of GPA from a training academy or has to prove its ability to some, independent assessor. No. The service dog, if the dog owner says it is, and that's it. That's not a standard.
Yeah, I'm actually a bit surprised about the situation in the United States because I mean here in Austria, and I think also in, as far as I know, in all other European countries, there is a license that you need, you know, for a service dog,
Yep.
and they have to pass a test and I don't know
Yep.
whatnot. And you know, the thing is that as soon as you have this kind of licensing system in place, you see what happens. What happens is simply that you're not going to see any service dogs anymore.
Yep.
Because I think the last time I saw a service dog was around like 3 years ago in Vienna. Like, and you just see that like hardly any dogs actually pass these all the necessary tests, at least
Yep.
here in Austria. And yeah, you just don't see that. You just don't see them here. And it's a bit puzzling to me why this doesn't exist in the United States. And it's just so weird. I mean, it really sounds like, I mean, I can understand that it's, you know, everybody here would think that, yeah, you know, the United States, they're very organized, you know, very, you know, you have regulations for everything. But apparently, like, this seems to be kind of a blind spot.
Oh yeah.
And it's I really don't understand why. Like why is that the case?
Well, I
Like,
mean, it's a case because of dog culture. You know, it's like dogs are not something you can regulate in
yeah, but
this
it's the
system. You
same
know, it's
here,
like
you
they
know, it's
always get. Well, actually, I mean, the fact that you have that is a big improvement, and it's very telling because that's been my estimation also. Because, like I said, if you apply any real standards here, it's like boom, they're gone. Right? It's
yeah,
like
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
that not almost none of them do anything useful. And even like I said, my first encounter with a service dog, because you really didn't see them much until last maybe 10, 12 years ago. You had this explosion of fakes everywhere because you can tell they're not. The dog is sniffing around, it's pulling on the leash,
Yeah.
it's trying to bite people. It's you know it's peeing on the floor. It's not a real service dog. It hasn't been trained to do anything useful. But before that, the first time I encountered one was in the late 90s in New York City. And I watched, it was a blind man with a guide dog. And a lot of people are like, okay, we'll make exception. Like, okay, maybe, well, we have to define what is a legit service dog activity, right? First, who qualifies for a service dog? Right? Who qualifies and what constitutes legit service dog activities? Like I say, well, it's my, you know, if my blood sugar gets low, it like, you know, tears the arm off a kid. And in theory, that's actually a legit service dog activity because they don't define what are legit service dog activities. Again, there's no, like I said, there's no standards here. There's no formal definitions or restrictions at all. None. All you have to, well, the only thing is you could say, okay, you have to be able to lie semi-convincingly. That's the only standard, right? I mean, that's it basically. But yeah, it's a good, you know, we have restrictions on everything else except this.
Yeah.
This even with other like as it's the you know Americans with Disabilities Act is what protects these things. And again, it's another case of there's protection for it, but none from it. Because you know, kicking out a legit service dog can bring down some fairly painful penalties because the United States Department of Justice will enforce that. Plus, the service dog handler can sue. But you know, again, like staff or proprietors, they can just ask, is that a service dog? Yes. What does it do? Well, whatever. Okay, you have to take their word for it. Yeah, you can kick it out if it misbehaves, but at that point, the damage is already done. But that's what's caused. But the problem is it's because there's not more pushback against this because the dog people have managed to, you know, co-opt really a lot of social justice narratives, you know, or premises. Like if you think there should be some standards here, real ones, you're ableist. right? You hate disabled people. You think they're like inferior to the rest of us. They don't have a right to public access. And moreover, like a lot of these, like, you know, if you expect them to pay fees or go for professional training, you're classist. You hate poor people and you want to, you know, you think they're inferior. Okay. So, and that's what really kind of keeps this situation the way it is. Looks like it too. It looks like we lost Sheepie. I'll catch up with her next time. But yeah, it's crazy that, yeah, there are no standards here. And you look at, like, say, the ADA laws, like if you're a disabled person in the United States, one of the ADA provisions was reserve parking for disabled people. And if you ever been to, like, every public parking lot pretty much has them. And usually it'll be like, say, right in front of the store. And you almost never see anyone parked in those spots because you have to, again, that actually has standards. So if you want to park in one of those spots, your doctor has to fill out a bunch of forms stating, you know, swearing that you're a disabled person that should be using one of these spots. Then you take that paperwork to your state motor vehicle agency, and if everything's in order, they review that. They issue you a hang tag. You hang it from the rear view mirror or put it on the dashboard, perhaps. But that's the thing, is that I've had a lot of people, even a lot of disabled people, bring that up. They say, well, I have to get a special permit to park my car in one of those spots. But these dog people don't. They can just, again, imagine if there were no standards for those parking spots, like they'd always be full. Yeah, right? Exactly. There'd always be somebody, because you don't have to prove anything. It's like, you disabled. It's like, yeah, yep. Yeah. You know, I am because I say so. It's like, again, you know, I talk about, they try to make a medical privacy issue out of it. You know, they say, okay, I have a right to medical privacy or whatever. But, you know, again, the disabled drivers, who probably in a lot of cases may also have a service dog, or some cases. Yeah, like sure. They already have to get the permit for the spot. But as you notice too, is that those spots almost never have anyone parking in them. Yeah. Like, never, you know, you almost never see it. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I can think is that, I mean, what might actually happen in Europe is, because the regulations have been in place for quite a long time.
Yep.
And, you know, my concern is that, you know, this is just going to become the way it is in the United States. You know, that all the dog nutters will actually discover this as their new pet peeve, and they say, yeah, well, we don't want the licensing, you know, for the service dogs because that's ableist or whatever. Yeah. So that's possible, you know. Perhaps you know, we always say that what happens in the US will happen 15 years later in Europe as well. So perhaps we are headed in that direction. I don't know.
Yeah. But well, I'm hoping that, I mean, it seems that that's an aspect of this that actually does get a lot of attention. That, you know, the whole, you know, service dog fraud scenario, because, you know, service dogs are a public nuisance, and, you know, and a lot of people have picked up on it, and there's a lot of, many people are opposed to it, but again, they don't speak up because, you know, it's politically incorrect. Well, really, to object to any aspect of dog culture, particularly that, but it's something that impacts a lot of people, particularly the retail workers. You know, they got, like, a dog takes a dump in the aisle of the produce section, and staff has to clean that up. Yeah. And, you know, those staff people and other people get, you know, even people who own dogs are grossed out about it. You know, we have food purity and safety laws for a reason. Why do we make an exception here? Yeah. Right. So, because that's the whole problem with it. You could say, well, you know, if the dog's well behaved, what's the big deal? No, the big deal is that, first of all, really all live animals are prohibited in many of these indoor public spaces, particularly food establishments. Plus, the other problem is that it violates the civil rights of proprietors, other customers, even the home rule protections like 10th Amendment of the cities and towns. So like the city could say, we don't want dogs in grocery stores, but the federal government has usurped that home rule power and says, no, provided they can lie about it, you have to let them in. Too bad, right? And so you have all this, right? So I think the standard for doing something like that should be very, very high. Like there should be some very, very stringent, like, okay, we're going to make exceptions for a few people to bring their dogs to eateries. The standards for that should be very, very high, but they're not because furry Jesus, unfortunately. So crazy. That kind of, there's other aspects of this that overlap with that. Like there was, Rodney couldn't make it today, but I know he's been following this, actually it's a small city in Arkansas that has had a pit bull ban since 2017. And of course, all the usual, cast of characters come pouring out of the woodwork to agitate against it. And personally, I don't get too wound up about these things. I mean, if Sherwood does vacate their ban, is it really going to change anything? But that's another aspect of this, because a lot of the objection is it's like, well, when you restrict any dog by breed, you're violating my core human right to own any dog I want. That's the claim. Like that's typically the objection to it. And the thing is that why is that right only attributed to dog people? Like, again, if you look at other animals, cats even, the biggest cat you can own without a big pile of special permits is about 20 pounds. But yet here they are, they're complaining, well, I can't have my 150-pound super mauler in my suburban backyard. That's a violation of my human rights. Why don't they object to these other, all these other animals are restricted, horses and other farm animals, exotic pets. There's unless it's something, again, something totally innocuous like a parakeet. That was something else I wanted to segue into also. But, it's like, yeah, you can restrict every animal on earth except dogs. That's the claim, basically. And nobody, but the problem is when you talk about why these bans fail or aren't very effective is it never comes up. Nobody goes to these public meetings and says, oh, you have a right to own any pet you want. When do I get my pet mountain lion or my pet rhinoceros? Never, right? So you know what? If you're going to restrict everybody else, why not this? Why? Same thing with the service dog laws or whatever. Why not this? Right? At least in theory, this is perfectly reasonable and legal too, because they claim where is the right to own any pet you want, particularly in a crowded community in a city or a suburb. How is that right attributed? How is that a protected civil right? It's not. And it's not if you're talking about anything else. It's only a right that dog people have. They'll claim, yeah, I have a right to own any dog I want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's there's just no common sense behind it, and I think the actual reason for all that, it all goes back to entitlement.
Yeah.
And the thing is that, you can say it's a cliche, but dog people are just the most entitled pet owners that you have. I'm sorry,
absolutely. Yep.
But they just beat all the others, for light years. They're just like the entitlement that you find with dog owners is just absolutely off the charts. And, these are just the manifestations of it. I think, they manifest it wherever they can. They manifest it in the public space. They manifest it legally. they manifest it in in any kind of social circles, and yeah, so I think this all, the basis of all this is just entitlement, and this is
Yep.
also what makes it so, so unlikable, just in general for me. It's like, even if I said, look, everybody needs a hobby, and look, if your hobby is to have a dog, fine. I mean, look, and who am I to tell you what your hobby is supposed to be? But it's so funny that every time you actually meet a dog owner, no matter if it is in the United States or in Europe, or you can go wherever you want, they always have this kind of weird sense of entitlement.
Yep.
And it's just, yeah, it's also kind of a mystery to me, like where that is actually coming from. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah, it's all interesting. Yeah, people talk about like why, but a question I always ask is like, why dogs, right? Because you and I, it was interesting to digress a little bit. I was re-listening to a bunch of segments from last year, some that you were on.
Okay.
And there's some really good actually, I was trying to find something. It's talking about, pit bull bans or the lack thereof. It was actually last March. I went on an epic rant about, well, basically some of the dog law changes in Florida that, vacated the Miami pit bull ban, for example. But I was just re-listening to some of the conversations you and I had. And there's a lot of really good ideas there, a lot of really good content. And we were talking about the social aspects of this and how maybe the owner, I guess people are interested in pets that are kind of like them, perhaps, and brought up, and there's a discussion you and I had. I'm sure you remember. We were talking about the social dynamics in play here, and that, I mean, dogs themselves have a very sort of fascistic social hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
Not
I
even
remember.
necessarily.
Yeah.
Some folks say, well, the whole alpha pack leader thing has been debunked, but whatever. I mean, clearly anybody who's been around dogs or had dogs can see there's definitely like a very rigid social hierarchy in place there. Either the dog is at your throat or at your feet. And it's true
Yeah.
probably for all dog breeds, really. And the dog owners themselves also seem to possess that trait. They either like they're in charge or you're in charge. Like in a neighborhood, really, we're all equal. Really, nobody's in charge. And even when you have a situation where I guess there is some kind of hierarchy. I mean, personally, I'm in favor of a more sort of informal social dynamic, even when there's a hierarchy in place. Like if I'm the hike leader or the IT dev manager or whatever, I don't run the place like a concentration camp, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that even goes, I mean, that was illustrated when, I mean, the incident that caused me to give up my hike leading volunteer career was with that, one dog nutter that was breaking local laws, violating posted park rules, violating forest best practices, ignoring activity leader advice. And I even admit, it's like the mistake I made was to try to deal with him in sort of an informal, civil way when you can't deal with dog people like that. Again, it's true of them. They're either at your throat or at your feet. You
Yeah.
have to tell them, this is the way it's going to be or else, right?
Yeah.
That's all they understand,
It's a good
but sort of
point.
like
Yeah, good point.
why dogs, but I think that people like that are attracted to the dog space, and they've, agitated for these, social and public policy and legal environments where they can exercise that, where they can get away with it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I just remembered that in some comments on YouTube, I actually wrote that, dogs are for Stone Age people.
yeah.
And it really is a little bit of this kind of, yeah, as you said, this fascism plays into it. It's also this kind of Stone Age mentality that, you know, either you're the one that is stronger or you're the one
Yep.
that has to submit to somebody else. And it's really this kind of dichotomy that they live in. And it's just,
Yep.
it's so primitive, you know, it's just, yeah, it's
Well,
just
it is.
so
Yeah,
backwards.
it's very it's dis-civic and anti-civilizational.
Yeah,
And you see
exactly.
many of them get, like I said, they get hoist with their own petards. Dog people fall victim to it because, again, you know, they've agitated for a public policy environment where they can just do whatever they want with no consequences, right? As dog people,
Yeah.
they're above either there are no rules or they're above all the rules. And they'll you know, they continue to agitate for that even after they've fallen victim to it. Just thinking, okay, you've got what do we have in the abstract? We have we have an entitled group of people that are treated like, I don't know, a neo-aristocracy or something, that there's a different set of rules for them, which is basically no rules, and they're as opposed to everyone else, right? But they can just do whatever they want, and even including kill people with impunity. But what happens? So you got that group of people, right? What happens when the interests of two or more of the same group intersect? Who wins?
Yeah.
Who wins? And the thing is that, like, well, like you said, it's this Stone Age kind of fascistic knuckle dragging mentality is the strongest wins, right? And that's why we're headed towards this pit bull singularity, because we're going to, I mean, if nothing changes, basically pit bulls or whatever, it could be some other even more dangerous breed of dog, is just going to replace everything else, because there's no real sense of ethical right and wrong. You're right. It's just the strongest survives. That's why, you know, these ADEP people, they'll be crying that a pit bull dismembered their like mini shepherd or whatever. But I don't know what to say to some, because those are the people that are agitating for the environment that enables that kind of thing. So I don't know what to say. What do you say to them? It's like, look, your dog got into a fight and lost. You should have gotten a tougher dog,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's really, because what else do you say when, again, they're the same people agitating for that environment? It's like, you say you can't be held accountable, well, neither can they. You say you can't be held to any standards, well, neither can they. And that's why these pit bull bans almost always fall on their ass, because it's like, look, you can't tell a dog owner not to do something. And a pit bull owner is a dog owner, because I would try to explain to these people, I'd say, look, if you ban or restrict, say, pit bulls or whatever dog breeds you don't like, you're basically going against your own ideology, because you're telling, say me, for example, you're telling me as a potential dog person that owning a pit bull is something I'm not allowed to do. But according to their own, you know, ideals, you can't do that. You never say no to a dog person, ever. Everything they do is good. And so what if it tore your dog in half? It's like, look, dog works in mysterious ways. Everything the dog does is good by definition. And I guess, does that include killing other dogs? I guess so. But then they want to draw the line there. But like, why draw the line? Oh, a dog can only do wrong when it's attacking and killing other dogs. That's the only time it's wrong. Like, but why draw the line there at what's acceptable and what isn't? And it goes against their other, you know, the rest of their ideals. But yeah, that's what they've created. You're right. It's an environment where, yeah, only the toughest survive. There's no protections from these things at all. So yeah, they tell the mini shepherd people. That's why we're headed towards a pit bull singularity. It's like, if you want to, you know, if you want your dog to survive a dog fight, get a fighting dog. That's a solution.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I just remembered that, was it actually me who made this video, or was it somebody else? I don't remember. But there was this video about how this dog culture breeds violence. I think it was me, actually. And there you had several scenes there where, I mean, one of them was in a dog park where dogs started, you know, to go at each other's throats. And then the owners started to go at each other's throats as well. And one of the owners actually said, you know, explicitly, go and get a real dog. Yeah, which he meant,
Yeah.
I mean, the other guy had some small lap dog, whatever. And then the other one told him, go and get a real dog, which means, yeah, of course, go and get your XL bully if you want to survive in our hierarchy. And then there was another scene where I think it was in Boston, I think, where there was an absolutely horrific scene where in the street, I think some bully breed attacked a small, like really, it was a puppy, like it was like, I don't know, like 10 inches, like that thing. And you know, the owner of the puppy was a woman, and she tried to defend her dog, and she was bleeding already herself. I don't know, because she just fell on the pavement, or she was bitten by the other dog as well, and she was crying, and it was a absolutely horrific scene, and everybody was going on about the poor woman. And then I committed the sacrilege to actually say, well, I mean, of course I feel sorry for her, but I have to say that she's not, you know, completely not to blame for the situation. I mean, she had her dog as well. I mean, of course, it was a tiny little handbag thing that she had, but she contributed to that culture that, you know, dogs for everybody, everywhere, all the time. You can take them wherever you want. And look, this is, if you have a certain kind of foresight, then you actually know, okay, it has to cause trouble if everybody's walking around with a potential predator animal. I mean, it's just common sense, you know. And yeah, I mean, I'm sorry for her that she was totally shaken up, and she was shaking, and her face was covered in blood. But look, that's what you wanted. I mean, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
it wouldn't
exactly.
have
Yeah,
happened with a hamster. I mean,
they exactly, you know, they agitated for a public policy environment where they can just do whatever they want. It's like, okay, you know, it's like, and they got it, you know. And you're right, they don't have, and maybe you see this in other areas of politics also, but you even brought it up with the you know, the accidental killing of dogs in Europe. I mean, at some point, some dog nutter is going to get jacked up under those laws that they agitated for. They're going to say, oh, you couldn't swerve in time or couldn't brake. It doesn't matter. And if you got a dash cam video, it's like the dog jumped like 1 centimeter in front of your car. When you're going 100 kilometers per hour, doesn't matter. Boom, prison. And, you know, suck on that. But that's the thing is, they're not. And again, you see this in other areas of politics also, but they're not smart enough to. They're not smart enough. They're not mature enough. They, you know, lack the sufficient self and situational awareness to see that that could be a problem for them at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or somebody they care about.
Yeah.
Because it's totally unreasonable. I mean, it's totally unreasonable.
Yeah,
and I don't know how you. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. No, sorry. It's. I just wanted to say that I will never understand what is going on in their heads anyway. But I mean, as you said, you know, without, you know, I don't want to be snarky or anything, but I think it really comes down in the end to kind of an intelligence problem, or like a brain power problem. Let's put it that way. That, you know, everybody who does have a certain minimum level of intelligence can actually understand that this is something, like, on the long run, that will hurt me as well, you know. Like, I might be on the other side, you know. But you know, if you just lack the brain power to understand that, I mean, there's just nothing we can do, I guess. I mean,
and some of them, you know, it's interesting is that you know, we talk about some of the different, you know, types of dog farmer, like with the ADEPs, or even those reverse ADEP people. And the problem is, even when they do fall victim to it, they don't properly reconstruct, right? In fact, I think they actually get worse. Like, I actually detest the ADEPs more than the pit nutters, because at least the
Mhm.
pit nutters, there's sort of a kind of a simple honesty there, right? Or at least their ideology is congruent with itself. Like, I can totally disagree with somebody on something, but if I think they're being honest about it, I respect that, right? And you
Yeah.
see that in other areas of politics, but or public policies or social norms or whatever. But the thing is that like these ADEP people is like, okay, they were attacked by one of their own essentially, or they're afraid of that happening, but they don't properly reconstruct. They continue to agitate for an environment where dog people can just do whatever they want, right? They want that, but without pit bulls. And the problem is you have to have like epic levels of cognitive dissonance to get there. But
Yeah.
again, it's totally at odds with the rest of their ideology. They'll say, yeah, as a dog person, I can do whatever I want. I don't have to adhere to any rules. I don't have to respect anyone else's rights. In fact, I can just completely destroy everything around me. Kind of, we were talking about the real estate stuff earlier. I can lay waste to my neighborhood, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. Oh, and let's ban pit bulls.
Yeah.
And it sounds like I did that, and folks are listening. I did a couple of monologues on that a couple of years ago. It was my Mutt heads. I think it was 14 and 15, where I talked about that, and I got into that, and also like why that is. But
Mhm.
but that's the problem, is they continue to, they'll even assert that, like I say, okay, why not, like often that, if you bring up problems with dogs, they distract onto some other animals, like, well, interesting. The cat distraction is classic. There's been a lot of horse bashing going on. I'm like, horses. Like, horses are totally irrelevant to the
Yeah.
lives of 98% of people. It's like you
Yeah.
have to, again, horses have restrictions, a lot of them. You have to, among other things, you have to have at least 2 fenced-in acres to own one horse. So it's like, okay, let's apply that. If you want to bash horses, let's level the playing field. Let's apply that to dogs. If you want to own a dog, you got to have at least 2 fenced-in acres. And you could argue it's for the, in the best interest of the dog, right? Because you don't want to put like some 200-pound bull mastiff in an apartment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's for a lot of reasons. There's a ton of good reasons to restrict that. One of them is just animal welfare, and that's why they, restrict horses and other forms. Let's apply that. But you say that to these dog people, they completely lose their shit. They're like, no, 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 no. I have an absolute, unconditional human right to own any dog I want, anywhere I want, and to bring it everywhere I want. Period, full stop, end of story. Oh, and let's ban pit bulls. It's like, ugh. But that's their narrative. And that's one reason why we don't get traction on these breed restrictions, is because, unfortunately, people like that are out in front of the, they're the ones sort of spearheading the anti-dangerous dog initiative. But they go to these public meetings, they never use the right arguments.
Yeah.
That's the problem. They point to, well, photos of dead kids or whatever, but that doesn't move people when the consensus is that the dog can do no wrong. It's like, yeah, pit bulls do delete lots of kids, but according to the narratives of dog culture, I guess they all deserved it. So it doesn't matter, right? Like, one thing I brought up is they love bringing this up. They're like, look at this. It's like, look at all these pit bull deaths. It's like they're killing people left and right. And there's a lot of, one thing I wanted to get into, and maybe we won't. We're coming up on 2 hours, so maybe we won't get too into it. But sort of like, the use and abuse of statistics, particularly in this space. But dogs should not be should, pets should not be killing people. It's ridiculous, right? Like really, all these should be banned. You're right.
Yeah,
Like nothing,
absolutely. Yeah.
this is ridiculous. And a lot of it, I think a lot of this is, there's a couple of big problems with this. One is, they point to, say, pit bulls, because they say, oh, well, they're 6%, and these are U.S. statistics, but they're 6% of the nation's dog population, but they're, 65% of the, the really bad outcomes where somebody is killed or maimed, say. But they say way more so. And what about Rottweilers? So like, well, Rottweilers are, a distant number 2. But the thing is, well, first they come out with a per capita stats, right? They say, okay, on a per capita or per unit basis, they're way more likely to kill somebody than these other breeds, perhaps, right? But then they show this, but now they're conflating that with the absolute numbers, because Rottweilers are only about 2% of the nation's dog population. So really what you want to, you want to equalize, you want to look at on a per capita basis. So if we had 3 times as many Rottweilers, what would this orange bar look like? It would probably, they might still be number 2, but they'd be a close number 2. So just because the absolute numbers are lower does not mean they're safe to have around, right? So they conflate. So they do 2 things wrong. One is they first they claim that, okay, human beings have no right to life or anything, and dogs can just do whatever they want to us. But then they say, oh, like, let's ban pit bulls because they kill too many people.
Yeah.
But according to who cares? Like, they could kill everybody. Under their belief system, dogs could kill. They say, okay, it's time to extinct the human race. Boom, done, right? It's all good. First, you want to say pets should not be killing people. That's wrong, right? These aggravated assaults are something we don't want, regardless of breed. Yes, pit bulls are overrepresented, but dogs attacking random people is something, it's a bad thing. We don't want it. Let's get that out of the way first. But those people, oh no. Right, like if my Rottweiler goes off property and tears the arm off a kid, well, that's a kid's fault, because he didn't show over the proper respect. I'm like, you know what? All those people can just fuck right off. They are why we have this problem, even though they might oppose to like one aspect of it. So and the other problem too is that I think this stuff is underreported. I think if we knew the real picture, I think it might be quite surprising to some people. The thing with a pit bull death is that they kill in a very spectacular fashion. You have people that they're battlefield level injuries. People are literally torn to pieces. Like the first responders show up and there's body parts just strewn everywhere.
Yeah.
In fact, like there was one actually near me. It was an elderly man, Roy McSweeney, was killed by a neighbor's pit bulls in his own backyard. And I believe it was a McSweeney case. And one of one of the first responders, a paramedics, he was a military medic in one of the terror wars, either Iraq or Afghanistan. And when he first got there, he assessed it. He thought a bomb had gone off because McSweeney was like torn to pieces, like his arms were off. And he said, because that's a kind of injury you see when somebody steps on a landmine or takes a direct hit from a mortar, say, right? So but something like that is very difficult to kind of cover up or sweep under the carpet, right? Whereas these other dogs kill in a less spectacular way. It's like, the difference between being shot with a grenade launcher and shot with, say, a 9mm pistol. I mean, both can kill, but one creates a much more spectacular outcome than the other. And I think it's probably why. So the pit bull killings, and I don't have proof of this. Well, actually, I do have proof because it's, it's evident in the outcomes that they say, well, like a German Shepherd will just snap and release. But that could be enough. If they tear out your throat or even the arteries in your arm, it could still kill somebody. Yeah, okay, that doesn't, there's not body parts strewn all over a half acre, but so what? They're still dead. But something like that is, I think, easier to cover up, because it seems, the incentive is to protect the reputation of dogs generally. These medical examiners are like, or even the media people or even police are like, do we really want to blame the dog for this? They just put it down. It's heart failure, right? That's what it was,
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, why did it just stop? They're saying, well, it was heart failure. It was due to low blood pressure. Why was their blood pressure low? Well, it was blood loss. Well, how did they lose their blood? And they said, well, it was neck trauma. Well, what traumatized their neck? And they say, well, it's an animal bite. Well, what kind of animal? And they're like, well, it was a canine. Say, well, was it a domestic dog, or like was it a pet dog or a wolf or what? And like, well, yeah, it was a. So you have to really probably have to. But I'll bet you if you dig into a lot of cases, like if you were to audit like every death for the past 10 years, these numbers would be a lot higher.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely. And by the way, it's also a good point. I never really thought about that. But if you look at these statistics, it's funny that the account is called Ban Pit Bulls.
Yeah.
And as you said, if you actually look at these statistics, then why is it just the pit bulls that should be banned? I mean, it's just so absurd to.
Yeah. Like why draw?
If you look at it, then you see all the death numbers, and then why do you say that okay, we will just take like the top 284? I mean, that's tragic and we should do something, but we don't care about the rest.
Right.
I mean, that's absurd. Like,
if this was
anything else, then everybody would jump on it and say, okay, we have to reduce it to 0. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But
well,
here
they do with other,
even
with other pets, it's like, too, is we had a thought experiment a while back. I think it was on the old Discord, and actually really it was on my own old blog. And it was one of my blog commenters brought up, like, what if there was a pit cat? A pit cat. And I said, really, like, where do I get one? And the thing is that, and I brought this up, it's an interesting thought experiment. Let's say you had a cat breed that was like approximately the same. What would be the outcome? And first of all, it's unlikely because, cats don't have the protection that dogs do. I kind of hate this. I don't really promote any pet ownership, even though I'm a pet owner. But I would say I'm not opposed to it, but I don't necessarily promote it either. But, no other animal has a protection that dogs do. So a pet cat or a pet goat, if you will, or a pit, sorry. First of all, it's very unlikely that such a thing would even get into circulation because cats are already heavily restricted. Like if say they weighed 50, 60 pounds, they'd be already banned, right, by definition. So it's very unlikely they would get into circulation at all. And even if they did, my estimation is you'd probably hit about 3 deaths and they'd be banned everywhere. And I'm just talking about, I'm talking because I understand that in the U.S. political paradigm, you'd hit your 3rd death and the president would call the congressional leaders into his office and he'd say, look, I want you to write up a bill banning these things everywhere, all 50 states, all embassies, all military bases, all territories, every square inch of our jurisdiction banned, 100% completely banned. I want you to write that up and have it on my desk in 48 hours. That's what would happen if it was any other animal. But if it's a dog, that's the problem. If it's a dog, it's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's just absurd. Oh, well.
Fun never stops.
Good,
So,
good. And another point, actually, just if you permit, that's why I actually don't really like those ADEP people. I'm not even really convinced about about their intentions, because they always they always come they always show the statistics about human deaths, but somehow I have the suspicion that they're actually just upset about the bully breeds and the pit bulls, not because they kill people, but because they probably kill other dogs.
Yep.
So it's
Well,
the human deaths are just used as kind of a pretext, and because everybody can relate to that, because not everybody has a dog.
Well, I guess they
But
use that because if they use this strictly, you're right. Exactly, I agree. I mean, there's a couple of ways are disingenuous about it. I think they're not. Most of them are not acting in good faith, because probably if you were to ask them, like 80% of the people on this sub about this and to get an honest answer, let's say you pumped them full of truth serum, they'd be like, yeah, you know what? Like, that's the only reason we're interested. It's like dogs killing humans or other animals, perfectly okay. Right? These death stats really are totally irrelevant because, it's dogs above people, it's dogs above everybody. But yeah, a dog killing another dog is a bridge too far. But that's the thing, is you're not going to get the public, like if they were to come out with that publicly, and sometimes you see it when you get into it, it's like many of them, they won't come right out and say that, because they know if that were there, like, for example, like the people who are promoting some of these pit bull bans were to come out with that, there'd be even less support for it than there already is. It'd be like, why would I ally myself with somebody who just thinks I should be chopped up and put in a can of Alpo?
Yeah.
Never. It's like, I'm not, that would be, it's insane. But the other thought I had too was that, anybody who's been in this space knows that the number one rhetorical tactic of the dog foamer is a distraction, right? It's always something else that needs attention first, right? It's all kinds of deflections and relative privation fails and all that kind of stuff. So I think that a lot of those people, they rant and rave about pit bulls, people who own these other breeds. And remember, the dangerous dog problem is only one aspect of dogs in society, because we got dog attacks, dog noise pollution, dog waste everywhere, dogs in places they don't belong, and so forth, right? I mean, really, those are your big four verticals, I guess. And of course, this only addresses one aspect of that, even though those aspects do overlap some. But I think that many dog people rant and rave against pit bulls because that's a distraction, right? Because as long as they're at it, and I picked up on this too, was that I believe that many of them, at least a big minority of them, believe that as long as there's a dog that's a bigger piece of shit than theirs, or a dog owner that's a bigger piece of shit than they are, they're off the hook.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're off the, it's like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, my German Shepherd has sent like 5 kids to the hospital, but who cares, because my pit bull, right? Yeah. And that's part of the problem with that too, is that focusing only on the worst of the worst, I think is terrible policy anyway, for a lot of reasons. But of course, they may not always be the worst of the worst. Like this could be replaced with, I know, like Presa Canarios are becoming more popular, and I think on a per capita basis, there's many dog breeds that are actually worse. It's just you don't hear about them much because there's very few of them. Mm-hmm. There was a little girl killed in Arizona recently by some Cane, I believe they were Cane Corsos. And of course, the parents had gotten it as like guard dogs. It's like nice going, nice own goal there, Fido. But, but again, it doesn't happen too often because, again, there's way fewer of them. But that could be, but I think it's there are many of them, they only care about this because of, again, the violence against other dogs. And it's also, a deflection, sort of an internal deflection tactic. Like, okay, maybe I'll lay off the horse bashing or the cat bashing and bash this other dog breed that at least superficially creates worse outcomes than mine does. So.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. That's.
Yeah. Well. The focusing, and that's the other thing too, is I had some other talking points, but focusing on, or a lot of the focus on just this one sub aspect of this has unintended consequences. And I think in a sense it may actually make the problem worse. I don't know if they had it with you when you were growing up, but back in the 1980s, there was a concept introduced called the boomerang effect. And what it relates to is if you rant and rave endlessly, sort of agitate against something, you're actually sort of, inadvertently, as an unintended consequence, you make the problem worse, right? Mm-hmm. And they noted that happened was, like, when I was a teenager at the time, they, again, they would have, like, because we would have, health classes in school and so forth, and we'd be lectured about smoking, drinking alcohol, having, unprotected sexual encounters and all that. And we were constantly, but what they found is that if you agitate against these things too much, it actually makes the problem worse, because then the kids would be more likely to try those things.
Yeah.
Right. So I think in that, you see that in this space also is because you have all this constant agitation against pit bulls. But I think it actually, well, it was a couple of things. Like, some people are going to rebel against that. They're going to say, you know what, I'm subject to all this propaganda. Maybe I'll adopt a pit bull of my own and see what happens. Right. Like, they can't. Yeah. Because they don't trust, because when you're propagandized all the time, you feel like you're being lied to. So there's that. And it also makes it attractive to the wrong kind of people, because you say, yeah, these dogs are killing and maiming people, and the owners get off scot-free. Who does that appeal to?
Yeah.
Right. Somebody looking for thug cred or interested in injuring others without getting into trouble. Right. So by agitating against them, they're sort of inadvertently, agitating for them. And you see that in other, and like I said, in other spaces. They actually came up with a term for it in the 80s. It was called the, boomerang effect. And I guess as part of that, it's also that, the pit bull owners are now considered in many spaces to be, an oppressed group of people, because they say, okay, they're either the dogs themselves or the owners, because people are constantly, again, we get a group of people defined by their pet ownership, and they're constantly railed against. So now you have this, again, this grievance group has grown up around them. So I think that, a lot of the agitation against these things actually exacerbates the problem, such as it is. So that's another problem with this.
Yeah, that's probably true. Yeah. Never thought about that.
Yeah. It's a really messed up it's a really messed up space. Yeah. It's crazy. So, we're coming up on 2 hours, so I may close it out soon. Did you have any remarks or any more thoughts on this before I wrap it up?
No, I think go for dinner now, I think.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, so it is
Yeah,
about
yeah.
6:30 where you are. Yeah, good deal. So anyway, all right. Yeah, thanks for joining. And let's definitely, and I know your life situation has changed, but let's definitely keep up with each other.
Sure.
You know, try to, I mean, try to maybe keep your toe on the door in the community. You're
Yeah,
a
yeah.
valued member because a
Oh,
lot of
thank
the
you.
solo work you've done, and I re-listened to many of our chats from last year. There's a ton of good ideas and information on them. So, yeah, thanks for contributing to my channel also.
Well, thank you.
So yeah, anytime. Anywho, yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up. Okay, so this is Animal on Control, and as always, people first. Catch you later.
Bye-bye.